Have you ever met someone who seemed completely at ease in their own existence? You sit with them for a few minutes and something feels different. They're listening, but not trying to impress. Speaking, but not trying to persuade. Laughing, but not trying to be liked. There is a fullness about them, a sense that they have nowhere else to be, nothing to prove, nothing to become. And because of that, being with them feels strangely relaxing, almost like sitting beside a quiet lake. You may have wondered what they possess that others do not. More confidence? More self-esteem? More wisdom? More spiritual development? There is something deeper to it. They are not deriving their sense of self from a future version of themselves. Take a moment and consider something. Most of us spend our lives becoming. We are becoming more successful, more knowledgeable, more disciplined, more spiritual, more respected, more secure. Even when we achieve one goal, another appears. The movement continues. I'll be happy when, I'll relax when, I'll feel complete when. The destination changes, but the structure remains the same. There is always a future version of ourselves that seems more worthy than the one that exists right now. This movement is so common that we rarely question it. We assume it is normal. We assume it is necessary. We assume that if we stop becoming, life will stop. But let's look more carefully. The problem is not growth. The problem is not learning. The problem is not ambition. The problem begins when we believe that our peace, our worth, or our completeness exists somewhere in the future. Because then life becomes a waiting room. We are constantly preparing to live, preparing to be happy, preparing to be enough, preparing to arrive. And yet, somehow, arrival never comes. For a moment, notice how often your mind says, when this happens, then I will be okay. When I get the promotion, when I find the right partner, when I understand spirituality, when I become more confident, when I fix myself. The mind is always projecting fulfillment into the future. Now ask yourself something very simple. Has this ever truly ended? Have you ever reached a goal and found that the movement of becoming stopped forever? Probably not. There may have been relief. There may have been satisfaction. But soon another goal appeared. Another problem. Another horizon. The mind continued moving. This is not a mistake. This is simply how the psychological mind operates. It is constantly looking ahead, constantly improving, constantly comparing, constantly becoming, and then we encounter someone who seems free of this. Someone who radiates a quiet contentment that cannot be explained by circumstances alone. Their secret may not be that they found something. It may be that they stopped chasing, stopped measuring themselves against an imagined future self, stopped making their right to exist dependent on becoming somebody. And in that stopping, something that was always present became visible. Presence. Many people imagine presence as a special state. They imagine it as peace, silence, bliss, stillness, calmness. And while these experiences may sometimes accompany presence, they are not presence itself. Presence is much simpler. Presence is awareness of what is happening now and the knowledge that this awareness is already complete. That's all. Nothing mystical, nothing dramatic, just awareness, the sound of a bird, the feeling of your breath, the sensation of sitting in a chair, the movement of a thought, the presence of an emotion, awareness of what is already here. Notice something important. You do not have to create awareness. You do not manufacture it. You do not earn it. You do not achieve it. It is already present. Right now, you are aware of these words. Before any effort, awareness is already functioning. This is why many spiritual traditions say that presence is not something you attain. It is something you recognize. The challenge is not that presence is absent. The challenge is that attention becomes absorbed in thought, especially thoughts about becoming. Imagine standing in the middle of a beautiful landscape while staring at a map. The landscape is present, but your attention is elsewhere. Similarly, life is happening now. But attention is often occupied with future scenarios, future success, future failure, future security, future enlightenment, future versions of ourselves. The invitation of presence is not to reject the future. The future has practical value. We need plans. We need goals. We need direction. The invitation is simply to stop living psychologically inside the future. There is a difference between planning for tomorrow and emotionally living in tomorrow. One is practical. The other is becoming. So how do we begin to notice this movement of becoming? Not by fighting it. Not by trying to become someone who no longer becomes. That would simply be becoming in disguise. Instead, begin with curiosity. The next time you catch yourself mentally rushing toward the future, pause. Not for long, just long enough to listen. You may hear a familiar whisper. When this is over, I'll relax. When they appreciate me, I'll feel better. When I understand this, I'll finally be at peace. Notice how ordinary these thoughts seem. Notice how innocent they sound. And yet hidden inside them is a remarkable assumption. That something essential is missing now. That life is waiting somewhere ahead. Don't argue with the thought. Don't suppress it. Simply see it. As though you were noticing a bird land on a branch. The moment it is seen, something changes. Because what was operating unconsciously has entered the light of awareness. And awareness has a curious effect. It loosens what it illuminates. The strange thing is that most people never notice becoming while it is happening. Because becoming rarely feels like striving. It feels like common sense. Of course I need to think about next year. Of course I need to improve myself. Of course I need to prepare. And so the movement hides in plain sight. Like a fish searching for water. The fish never searches for water because it is absent. The fish searches because it has never noticed it. In the same way, we rarely notice how often the mind leaves this moment. Not dramatically, just subtly. A conversation becomes a rehearsal for another conversation. A walk becomes planning. A meal becomes thinking. A holiday becomes photographing. Life becomes preparation for life. And because this movement is so familiar, we hardly notice it. In fact, you can notice it right now. As you listen to these words, watch what the mind does. Does it stay here? Or does it immediately start comparing, analyzing, agreeing, disagreeing, remembering, planning? Don't try to stop it. Just notice. For perhaps the first time, you are not inside the movement. You are watching it. And once it is seen, another question naturally appears. If the mind is always moving toward the next thing, what is it hoping to find there? Peace? Relief? Completion? Whatever the answer, notice something curious. The future can contain events. The future can contain achievements. The future can contain circumstances. But it cannot contain experience. Because experience only ever happens here. Now. In this moment. Not tomorrow. Not next year. Now. And there is a simple way to test this. For the next few seconds, stop following the story. The story of what happened this morning. The story of what needs to happen later. Just for a moment. Listen. Notice the sounds around you. Feel the weight of your body. Notice the movement of breathing. Notice that life is already happening before the next thought arrives. Nothing needs to be added to this moment for it to exist. Nothing needs to be achieved. Nothing needs to be solved. Just this simple experience. And then there are the moments we usually try to escape. Fear, sadness, anxiety, restlessness. Notice what happens when they appear. Almost immediately, the mind begins working. How do I get rid of this? Why is this happening? When will this end? But what if, for just a few seconds, you did nothing? Not forever. Just now. If anxiety is here, let it be here. Feel it directly. Not the story about it. The sensation itself. The tightness. The energy. The movement in the body. Something surprising often happens. The struggle begins to soften. Not because the feeling disappeared, but because you stopped fighting it, like loosening your grip on a rope you've been pulling for years. And as you continue noticing these things, another discovery begins to emerge. Thoughts come and go. Plans come and go. Moods come and go. Entire periods of life come and go. Yet something remains. The part of you that notices. The part of you that was present when you were a child. The part of you that was present yesterday. the part of you that is present right now. You don't have to believe this. You can check for yourself. For a moment, put aside your name. Put aside your age. Put aside your job. Put aside your history. Put aside everything you usually use to describe yourself. Without referring to memory, who are you right now? Don't answer. Just look. Something is still here. Something is aware. And perhaps this is what presence really is. Not a special state. Not permanent calm. Not the absence of thought. Just this simple noticing. This simple awareness that remains while everything else changes. And perhaps that is why presence is not something that needs to be created. It was here while the mind was planning. It was here while the mind was worrying. It was here while the mind was becoming. Like the sky behind passing clouds. Never absent, only overlooked. Which is why the deepest shift may not be learning how to become present. It may be noticing that presence has been quietly waiting underneath the movement of becoming all along. And if you'd like to explore this more deeply, try something very simple. For 10 minutes each day, sit somewhere quietly. Not to meditate, not to achieve anything. Just sit. Listen to the sounds around you. The birds, the wind, distant traffic, the hum of a fan. Feel the air on your skin. Feel the body breathing. Allow everything to be exactly as it is. The mind will still wander. That's okay. Each time you notice it has drifted into the future or the past, gently return to what is here. A sound, a sensation, a breath. Nothing special needs to happen. Yet over time, something begins to change. The urge to constantly go somewhere starts to soften. And in those simple moments of just being, you may catch a glimpse of something that was always present beneath the movement of becoming. A quiet sense of presence. Here, now.